The golden candlestick fell to the floor with a clang. Blood spattered across the red carpet. The man shouted in anger that the girl could not die, and this was his order. He called the other man a pile of trash. The king sat in luxurious decoration and thought intensely. He shouted that there must be other ways, and that the girl's life mattered to the fate of their empire. After all, if she dies, then the entire empire will become her funeral object. The healer, who had been hit by a candlestick and his blood spattered the path, bowed to his knees. He explained to the king that medicine could barely keep the princess alive for a year after she contracted the plague. Her body was burned. He was afraid that the girl would not survive the night. He informed the king and princes that they should hurry up and pay their beloved princess one last visit. The 5 young men hurried. The king and princes approached the high tower where the princess lived all this time. The father, in despair, said that Sonia could not leave him. The door was opened creakingly for them by a young girl, the same age as the princess. It was the maid Rainbow. It was clear that the girl was tired and upset because of her mistress's illness. She said that she would show them the way and asked them to follow her. In the room of the sick princess there was a heavy, suffocating smell of the proximity of death and medicinal herbs. Sonia fell into an uneasy sleep. The exhausted girl's body seemed to be lost in such a large bed. Sadness was reflected on the young face of the king. Dark bruises lay under his sad eyes. The man could not come to terms with the imminent loss of his beloved daughter. Rainbow woke Sonia so that the girl could meet her father. The sick girl weakly opened her eyes. A terrible disease tormented the young body. The princess told her father in a hoarse voice that she could not sing to him because she was very sick. The king came closer to his baby. In an intermittent voice, the man told the girl not to be afraid. After all, soon the pain will go away, and Dad will be next to her. The man tried to stay close to his daughter, although his voice was already shaking. The princess anxiously asked her father if she would die soon. The girl understood what caused such sadness for her entire family. Sona asked her father that if she dies, then she won't be in pain anymore. The dark-haired prince angrily told his sister not to think about such things, because she is God's child of the inner empire. Therefore, the empire could not exist without her. He claimed that his sister would not die, and that everything would be fine with her, although he knew the truth. One twin prince warmly said that their little sister would surely recover, and they had never heard such quite beautiful singing. The other twin prince cried bitterly behind his brother's back so that the princess would not see it. The second prince, who wore glasses, asked Sonia if she wanted to say something to her father and brothers. His eyes were filled with pain. The girl looked doomedly at the beige ceiling. She whispered that she was very offended, terribly tired, and really wanted to sleep, but the princess also really wanted to sing one more song in front of everyone in the garden. The princess raised her hands up and looked at the dark, visible veins on her pale skin. The plague withered her body. The girl felt her imminent end. The king noticed his daughter's changed face and realized that he was getting closer. In a panic, he began to scream so that Sonia sincerely did not want to die. The man ordered that she was forbidden to die. Deep pain was reflected on the king's face. But it was too late. The girl died. Her soul was in the dark. The girl heard her name being called. The sound was as if it was coming from under the water. The princess opened her eyes and stared blankly into the dark space. She did not understand what kind of voice was calling her name. The voice whispered to the girl that the silent empire still needed her. He told her that the girl couldn't leave like that, and this time she had to move on with her life. The princess did not understand what time the voice was talking about. The princess woke up from a loud voice that ordered her to get up and called her his child. She opened her eyes and saw 2 small hands in front of her, child's palms. The girl stared at the ceiling of her bedroom. Through the open window, you could hear birds chirping outside. The little girl sat up on the bed. It was a warm, sunny day. The princess realized with shock that she had been given a second life and that this dream with a voice was a reality. She clenched her small fists tightly. The little girl looked around her room with a disbelieving look. The big blue eyes widened greatly. The princess could not believe that she was alive again. To check the reality of what was happening, the girl pinched her rosy cheek. She groaned loudly in pain. The princess sadly realized that although the pinch was painful, it was still much better than the pain due to a painful illness. She put her small hand to her heart and felt her heart beat. The door to the princess's room suddenly opened. Little Rainbow ran into the room and immediately asked why Sonia didn't call her as soon as she woke up. After all, the king and princes were already waiting for the princess in the dining room. The little princess confusedly asked Rainbow what year it was. Rainbow joyfully replied that the dear princess had just woken up and did not remember anything, because they had just celebrated her 10th birthday yesterday. According to the Silent calendar, the year was 1831. The princess indignantly replied to her maid that it was not she who was confused, but Rainbow. After all, the girl couldn't even put the butterfly on her dress properly. Sonia pointed her finger at her mistake. Rainbow was intently combing the princess's hair and doing her hair. Sonia thought that she had gone back 6 years. This meant that the princess had less than 5 years left before contracting the plague. The girl became sad in her thoughts. She thought about wanting to always stay in the palace, because how could she become infected with a plague that only spread on the borders of the empire? The princess believed that it was definitely not an accident. The princess trembled in fear and hugged herself by the shoulders. Sonia had the idea that the spreader of the plague was hiding next to her, and she was worried about who it was. Rainbow immediately noticed that the princess was trembling. The girl worriedly thought that Sonia was cold. She began to ask her mistress if she had caught a cold last night. Rainbow reminded her not to throw the covers off herself at night again. The princess puffed out her cheeks displeasedly and childishly. She muttered that she didn't do it, and now she would never get sick again. Determination burned in the girl's eyes. She was ready to do anything for this. Rainbow carefully threw a warm cape over the princess and said that if she was sick, then she should just ask the doctor to prescribe some medicine. And even if you're not sick, it still won't hurt to go. After all, Dr. Lauren said that many diseases can be prevented. The princess was hooked on her maid's last words. She asked enthusiastically for the statement that diseases can be prevented. The girl saw this as a solution to her future problem. Sonia enthusiastically and joyfully grabbed onto the rainbow. Everything was right. Her salvation was disease prevention. The maid noticed that her princess was acting strange today. But then Rainbow screamed in fear. The girl said that the princess's confusion almost made her forget that His Majesty and their Highnesses were impatiently waiting for Sonia right now in the dining room. The hurrying maid grabbed the princess by the hand and dragged her along. She shouted to Sonia that they should hurry up. The princess frightenedly asked Rainbow to slow down because she could not keep up with her. The princess's legs were tangled in her long dress. It was difficult for Sonia to quickly run after the rainbow. 2 little girls ran along the castle corridor. Rainbow shouted for the servants to give them way because the princess was in a hurry to meet His Majesty. The servants bowed in greeting before Sonia. While Rainbow was worried about getting to the dining room faster and clearing the way for them, the princess was thinking. Sonia believed that Rainbow was not a person and that he infected her with the plague. Rainbow was careless and would never try to cause harm. The princess asked Rainbow about Dr. Lauren, whom she mentioned. The girl was wondering if this was the man who always had an impenetrable face. Rainbow answered in the affirmative and said that this was an insensitive doctor. The princess thought that she could then eliminate Dr. Lauren from the list of suspects. After all, if the doctor wanted her dead, then why would he force the girl to drink that terrible decoction? The girl decided that in any case she had to survive this time. The large door opened with a creak. Behind it was a dining room that was bathed in light from the bright sun. The princess's 5 older brothers were sitting at the table. The twins and 2 older brothers smiled welcomingly at the girl. But the second to last oldest brother looked at his little sister with dissatisfaction. He was clearly not happy with her. At the head of the long table sat the young king on a red throne. He was truly glad that the girl had finally joined them for breakfast. The princess had just entered the dining room and had not even had time to say hello to everyone when she immediately told her father that she wanted to study medicine. Her eyes sparkled with joy at this. The firewood crackled loudly in the fireplace from the fire that was eating it. Loud, unexpected male laughter echoed throughout the dining room. The twins laughed loudly at their little sister's wish, wiping away the tears that had formed in their eyes. Between bursts of laughter, they asked the girl from whom she learned such a joke. The first prince seriously asked his little sister if she had lost a bet with someone. The prince assured the girl that she could tell him everything and he would kill this man. The youngest prince whispered quietly that only people of low status wanted to study medicine. He displeasedly asked whether Sonia realized that she was a princess and a child of God. His whole appearance showed dissatisfaction. The king pulled the younger Prince Ramsay away sharply. He sternly told him that the boy did not speak like that to his younger sister. The man asked Sonia to eat first, and then they would discuss her request. With an insulting sigh, the little girl sat down on the chair that the little maid had pulled out for her. She puffed out her cheeks with offense and said that she was serious in her request and was not joking at all. The princess's second elder brother folded his hands in front of his face and asked if she was no longer afraid of Dr. Lauren and why she suddenly wanted to study medicine. It seems that this was the only prince who took Sonia's wishes positively and seriously. Such a gentle interest from her brother cheered up the girl, and she stopped being offended. The princess looked at him thoughtfully and tried to find a suitable reason for such a desire. The second elder brother propped his fist on his cheek and asked the girl if there was any reason why. The girl was confused at first, and then the emotions on her face changed to deep sadness. The princess could not think of anything better than to tell them part of the truth. She stated emphatically that she had, in fact, had a terrible nightmare last night. The princess fearfully said that she dreamed of a fatal disease that spread throughout her body. She was in so much pain that she was completely exhausted, and she was only able to stay in bed, becoming weaker. Tears flowed from the princess's eyes because of the memories. She said that she had been sick and tormented for so long that she had almost forgotten her appearance. In the end, the father ordered Sonia not to die next to her daughter's bed, but she failed. Silver cutlery fell onto the oak table with a clang. The girl plaintively said that she did not want to get sick and did not want to die. The princess wiped tears from her face with the sleeve of her dress. She said that when she woke up, she decided to study medicine and become the best. The girl not only decided not to get sick, but also wanted to prevent her father and brothers from making any decisions. Rainbow stood behind her princess, deeply moved by such a nightmare. The king stood up from his seat and walked to his daughter's place. The man dropped to one knee and stroked Sonia's head. He asked her not to cry because it was just a dream. The first prince sincerely invited the girl to train with him so that she would never contract diseases. The young man looked at his younger sister with love. The twins were fooling around. One of them rolled his eyes mockingly and said that then Sonia would definitely not catch any disease, but training with Jessie had one side effect. The second prince continued that her body and brain would then be full of muscles like Jessie's. Jessie became angry with the twins Mello and Nello. With angry notes in his voice, he asked where their discipline was, but the boys were not embarrassed by this. They continued to laugh at their older brother. Ramsay wiped his lips with a napkin after eating, looking dissatisfied. He whispered angrily that it was nothing more than a dream. The boy believed that he was not worth whining and crying so much. He was bored. The second older brother began to explain to the girl that even the best doctor in the world could not promise that he would never get sick. He soon added that medicine is not as simple as Sonia thinks, and it will be difficult for her. The princess abruptly stood up from her chair and slammed her hands on the table. The girl desperately told her second brother Ansel that she was not afraid of any difficulties on her way to what she wanted. She was very afraid and was ready for anything. The king rubbed his chin thoughtfully, looking at his daughter's determination. He noted that Sonia was not quite the same as usual today. Mello and Nello, after their father's words, told everyone to look at Sonia's red cheeks. Mello said that if the father did not agree to his sister's wishes, then she might cry again. Nello asked to let the girl do what she wants. Jessie walked up to the twins and gave them strong brotherly slaps on the back of the head. The man noticed that all they could do was sit back and fool around. The boys didn't dare say anything after this. The king stroked his daughter and said that he simply did not know what to do with her. He agreed to the girl's request, but the king wanted to hear the princess sing The Nightingale in return. This song was loved most by Sonia's grandmother. The girl was happy. The princess, to celebrate, began to sing the song her father asked. Her eyes shone with happiness because the princess managed to take the first step. Rainbow did not have time to run after the fast princess. The girl asked her mistress to slow down because the doctor would not run away from them. But the happy princess did not listen to her. Sonia turned around as she ran and told Rainbow to hurry up, because this was the princess's first step to change her destiny. The little girls finally reached the hospital building, where they knew for sure they would find the Dr. Lauren. The building was made of light stone and quite large. In the courtyard there were beds with medicinal plants, The girls hesitantly went inside because the doctor was nowhere to be seen. Approaching the open doors, they carefully peered out from behind them to see the expanse of the room. Sonia quietly asked if Dr. Lauren was there. A young man was sitting on a chair in front of the patient's bed. The doctor quietly responded and said that he was here and invited Her Majesty to come in to see him. The man rose from his chair and approached the princess who had entered. He calmly asked her the purpose of her coming. The girl very hesitantly and shyly told the doctor that she would like to study the plague, and then added that she was mistaken and wants to study medicine. The princess thought intensely that the first thing that came to her mind was the illness for which she had gone to the doctor. The girl asked herself to calm down and speak calmly. Dr. Lauren was very surprised by the princess's first words about the plague and her desire to study medicine. He asked if the princess felt bad. The princess angrily said that her father allowed and ordered her to study medicine with Dr. Lauren. She was at the hospital to tell the doctor. Sonia expressed the hope that the doctor's instructions could be unconditional in the coming days. Dr. Lauren touched his temple as if he had a headache. The man closed his eyes tensely and exhaled. He quietly agreed, but as if not with the girl, but with his own thoughts. The man abruptly turned away from the girl and went about his business. He began to completely ignore her. The princess stood in bewilderment, not understanding why the doctor was behaving this way and what to do next. The princess began to get angry. She, screaming, asked the doctor what he meant by his behavior, whether he was ignoring the princess on purpose. The girl's cheeks turned pink from the emotions that overwhelmed her small body. Meanwhile, the doctor was rearranging his herbs. He explained to the girl that it was his duty to obey the king's orders if the man was outside the clinic, but the man believed that when he was in it, even the king did not have the authority to order him. The doctor turned around and apologized to the princess. The man asked the little girl to return to the palace because he could not follow the king's order. The girl shrank with her whole body at the man's words, and realizing the deplorability of her situation, shouted that she really wanted to learn medical science. Besides, she fought very hard for this permission. The little princess folded her hands in front of the doctor in a prayerful gesture and looked at him with big puppy eyes. Dr. Lauren asked why she wanted to study medicine. The girl convincingly said that she did not want to get sick or even die. She believed that she would not need to worry if she knew medicine. Rainbow took the worried princess's hand in an attempt to support her. The man thoughtfully rubbed his sharp chin with 2 fingers and noticed that such a well-groomed chick like the princess was so afraid of death. After that, the man leaned over and smiled at the perplexed girl. Lauren said that the princess's intelligence does not match Sonia's age, but it seems to come from the depths of the girl's heart. The princess became very tense at his words and became worried. The man continued, saying that it was even more interesting than he initially thought. Lauren decided to give the smart little princess a chance. The man straightened up after his words and smiled slyly, looking at the girl. Dr. Lauren promised the girl to teach her medicine if she did something for him. The little princess was delighted. She immediately agreed to all the conditions of the cunning doctor and asked what she needed to do. The princess seemed to glow after agreeing to her request. Dr. Lauren raised his index finger up to give importance to his next words. The man told the girl that there was no princess in his clinic, only his student could be there. The words were spoken with gentle severity. The doctor led his future student to a fabric screen. When the man moved her away, the girl saw a sleeping boy on the hospital bed. In his hands, Dr. Lauren held a plate of hot broth from which a haze emanated. The boy was dark-haired and not much older than Sonia. His bare chest was bandaged diagonally. Dr. Lauren gave the princess a task to start by telling this boy to get treatment. This test surprised Sonia. The doctor pointed his finger at the sleeping man and told the princess that if she managed to rub the healing ointment into the boy's wounds before sunset, then he would officially begin to teach Sonia. Otherwise, she knew what would happen. Did not like the doctor's last words very much, and she exploded with discontent. She angrily pointed her finger up at the man and asked what he planned to do with Her Highness then. Dr. Lauren again calmly repeated his words that in his clinic there are only doctors, students, and patients, and there is no Her Majesty. He emphasized his last words with intonation. Rainbow burned at the disrespectful doctor and shouted to the princess that this man was just a doctor, and how could he behave like that? Sonia dissatisfiedly pulled back Rainbow's fist, which she was clenching tightly. Sonia asked her to leave, because now she is a doctor's student. Rainbow Dash was confused by her princess's words that Sona was now just Dr. Lauren's student, not Her Majesty. The little maid looked at her princess in bewilderment. Dr. Lauren, leaving the room, told the princess that if she did not complete this task before sunset, he would inform the king that Sonia did not have the ability to practice medicine or needed a better teacher. The sick boy suddenly opened his brown eyes after the doctor left. There was an aura of anxiety around the guy. After waking up, the boy stood up abruptly. The unhealed wounds on his body caused severe pain. Therefore, the boy hissed through his teeth about how much it hurt him. Such an unexpected awakening of the guy frightened Sonia. The girl quickly realized that it was time to act. Sonia ran up to the boy, who was painfully pressing his hand to the wound on his chest. The princess reported that Dr. Lauren asked her to rub the boy with ointment before sunset. The boy was quite suspicious of new people, and sharply asked the little princess who she was. He wasn't polite to her. The princess was not used to such behavior. She offendedly asked the boy why he was so rude. The girl asked the interlocutor if he had learned that he first needed to introduce himself before asking the names of others in morals lessons. The boy decided to correct himself, and in a softer voice introduced himself that his name was Hugh, short for Hugh Hawk. The princess looked at her new acquaintance with interest. He was completely different from the girl's brothers. It seems he was not one of the Silanders. The boy exhaled heavily because of the pain that tormented him. The boy began to take off his blue shirt, then slowly unwrapped the bandages from his wounds. Unhealed wounds were visible in long stripes on the weak body of a child. A grimace of pain was frozen on his face. The boy calmly showed the princess his body and wounds, asking the princess to change the bandages. But the girl did not appreciate the interlocutor's attempts at politeness. She stared in shock at the boy's bare chest. Sonia abruptly turned away from looking at someone else's body. She squealed loudly, embarrassed that how could he be so disrespectful to the princess. The girl was very embarrassed. She was not used to simple behavior. The time had come for the boys to stare in shock at the little princess, who, in wild embarrassment, was hiding her reddened face in the long curtains. Hugh asked her if she was the princess of the Sealand Empire, the child of the god Sonia. The girl was surprised by the words of her new acquaintance because he knew her name. Sonia stopped hiding and looked at him with a question in her eyes. The boy began to shout loudly and angrily at the girl. He called her a missionary and ordered her to leave him. The girl stared at the boy with bewilderment and faint fear. She did not understand the word missionary. The boy shouted angrily that she was an insidious creature. He told the girl that she could kill him or cut him. Just let her do it quickly. He asked her to end her hypocrisy and stop pretending to be moral, because she was disgusting to him. The sick boy angrily threw a feather pillow at the girl's face and told her to get lost. The girl did not expect this, and she was unable to avoid an unpleasant blow from the pillow. The princess, covering her face, trying to soften the blow, stumbled. The girl fell to the wooden floor with a crash, hitting her arm. She was in great pain and had tears in her eyes. With tears in her eyes, but still belligerent, the girl shouted why the boy was so rude to her. She really didn't understand what his problem was and why he treated her this way. The boy looked with disgust at the girl sitting on the floor and turned away. The wounds on his body became very inflamed due to sudden careless movements. The princess was distracted from her interlocutor and looked fearfully out the large window that looked out onto the courtyard. The girl gasped loudly. The sun was already approaching the horizon. The little princess realized that she was running out of precious time to complete her teacher's test. She had to study medicine and therefore was not going to give up. The stake was her fate. The girl looked with determination in her eyes at the boy who was standing nearby. Time was almost up, so she had to act quickly. Sonia didn't understand why her name irritated Hugh so much. The princess wiped the tears from her cheeks and stood up. She quickly began to walk towards the irritated boy and said that she just wanted to change his clothes. But Hugh didn't listen to her. He shouted at the princess to fuck off because he would never trust a word from her royal family. The boy's cuts began to bleed as he screamed, causing him even more pain. He bent over in the hope that it would hurt less. The girl began to explain to the angry boy that she had just met him. But Hugh turned away upset and told the princess that it was the royal family that made him what he is now. Such confident words touched the girl. The princess shouted indignantly that she had nothing to do with his wounds, and why then did Hugh blame her? The girl picked up a pillow that was lying nearby on the floor after the boy threw it at Sonia. The princess did not understand what was happening and simply wanted to hit Hugh on the head for his prejudiced attitude. The princess began to swing her arms while the boy turned away and did not see her movements, but she was frightened to notice that his many wounds on his back had opened and blood was flowing from them down his back. The girl threw the pillow aside in a panic and began to rush around the room. The princess was looking for medicinal herbs and new bandages to help the patient. She couldn't remember what the third component was. The princess hastily picked up the bandages and ran up to the surprised boy, who did not understand the girl's panic. She whispered to him in fear that his wounds must be covered, otherwise they would become infected and kill the boy. The boy smugly told the frightened girl that it was even better, because then they would not be able to hold him hostage in this way. He did not pay attention to his fresh blood, but watched Sonia. The boy's words greatly shocked the girl. Her eyes opened wide, because the princess knew firsthand what death was. Shock turned to anger. The princess began to shout at the boy that he could not even imagine how terrible it was to be dead. Such an outburst from the princess greatly surprised Hugh. The girl pointed her finger at him and said that Hugh didn't know anything at all. She angrily assured the boy that after death he would have nothing, because he could only change by staying alive. The little princess seemed to have changed and become more mature. The years of the first life lived were not in vain. She told the boy that she had gone through so much to live, so he was not allowed to ask for even an accidental death. Hugh bowed his head in disappointment after these words. He muttered with displeasure that Ramsay's people did this to him. The boy asked the girl to stop lecturing him, because none of their royal families were completely trustworthy. The boy's sincere confession upset the girl. The princess understood why Hugh behaved this way when he found out that she was a princess and Ramsay's younger sister. She looked downcast. But she pulled herself together and assured the patient that Dr. Lauren had said that only patients, doctors, and students were in this room. The girl firmly told Hugh that she was just a student and Princess Syland was not here. Sonia was simply trying to give medicine to Hugh as the teacher told her. The boy said in doubt that who knows Sonia, she could put something in the ointment to cause Hugh even more pain. The princess was not going to give up because of the patient's lack of faith. She quickly waved her hand, and the vase that was standing next to her on the nightstand fell with a clang to the floor and broke. The girl said she would prove to him that she meant no harm. The girl grabbed a small fragment from the vase in her hand and brought it to her other bare hand. She thought hard that this way she wouldn't be able to cause herself more pain than when she was sick. The princess, without hesitation, quickly ran the shard over her delicate skin and cut herself. She quickly ran to the bowl of ointment and demonstratively applied it to the wound. The ointment really stung a lot. The girl, with tears in her eyes from pain, told the boy that now he could trust her because she had not done anything with the ointment. The boy definitely did not expect such determination and courage from the little princess. He looked at her wound in surprise and did not know what to answer. The princess cried a lot because of how the ointment burned on the wound, but she still wiped away her tears and overcame the pain. After all, she didn't have time to feel sorry for herself. Sonia asked the boy if she could treat him now. Hugh exhaled in shame, as he understood that because of his words, the girl cut herself and was now crying in pain. The boy lowered his sad eyes and agreed for the princess to treat him. They sat down on the bed so that it would be more convenient for the girl to smear the taller guy's back. The girl carefully applied the ointment to the open wounds with her finger, but still, the careful movements brought excruciating pain to the boy. When the wounds on his back were completely treated, the guy turned his head and asked the princess for ointment. He wanted to anoint his front himself so that the princess would not be embarrassed by his body. The princess was very embarrassed and tense. She quickly handed the boy a bowl of ointment and apologized profusely. The girl explained that she didn't really know how to do it. And this was understandable, because the princess did not need to know. The girl watched with sadness and intensity as the boy smeared his wounds on his chest. She anxiously fiddled with the embroidery of her dress. When the work was finished and the boy's wounds were covered with clean bandages, he apologized for calling the princess a missionary earlier. Hugh was very embarrassed about what happened with the vase. The princess asked a patient, Dr. Lauren, in surprise about the meaning of the word missionary in his home country, whether it was an insult. The boy thoughtfully scratched his cheek with his finger and said that the missionary was a kind of giant sea monster. He was the last thing the sailors of their country wanted to face. The princess was unpleasantly surprised by this definition of the word, because the boy had called her that before. She indignantly asked how he could call her a monster. The little girl was burning with indignation. The boy looked mockingly at the angry little girl. He jokingly told the princess that she actually kind of looked like her, because her pink long hair looked like the tentacles of the monster he had seen earlier in the drawings. The princess, in horror, imagined herself in the form of a sea monster, how her beautiful hair turned into tentacles and her eyes glowed red. The princess monster wriggled terribly and shouted that it would eat her in her fantasies. The girl grabbed a pillow from the bed, and in feigned anger began to beat the laughing guy who was covering his face with his hands. She screamed that it was nothing like that. Hugh, laughing, assured the girl that the image of the missionary was much more dangerous than she. Hugh said that the missionary was hiding deep in the sea and following a passing ship. When the coldest time comes, he uses his tentacles to attack the ship, trying to drag it into the abyss. Even if there are lucky ships that manage to escape the attack, the missionary does not let them go. Its tentacles cause a splash of cursed waves, and as soon as a sailor is splashed, he develops a dirty disease. Sonia asked if the missionary was spreading the disease. The boy was embarrassed that Sonia was so close to him. He said thoughtfully that they considered the missionary the most insidious death of sailors. After all, he plays with his victims until they die. The girl caught the boy's words about the infected and moved even closer. The princess was most interested in what would happen to the infected, and she impatiently asked the narrator this question. Hugh was very surprised by the girl's interest and persistence. He sheepishly said that those infected develop a fever, quickly weaken, become pale, but have pink-like scars all over their bodies. According to the boy, the infected continued to cough, and when they started coughing up blood, they soon died from severe asthenia. Sonia recalled in horror her condition during her illness. The princess realized with horror that the symptoms that the boy described of the dirty disease were very much reminiscent of the plague that the girl had suffered from in a past life. The frightened girl bent over, as if she was trying to hide from memories from the past. She asked Hugh what their people call this disease. The princess seemed to be under the influence of a slight panic attack. The boy became very serious and said that this disease was called in his country the curse of the abyss. This was punishment from the deep waters, which is contagious among sailors. The princess was very interested in whether ordinary people who did not go to sea caught this disease. The boy asked with confusion why she wanted to know so many details about the dirty disease. The little princess's face had changed greatly and seemed to not match her inner self. The girl seriously lowered her eyes and said that she had seen this disease before. The boy confidently said that this was impossible, because the disease only affects life at sea and sick sailors always jump into the sea to kill themselves in case of possible infection of a large number of people. Hugh assured that those who caught the disease by chance were also quarantined by a specialized organization. The girl trembled violently. She understood what Hugh meant. He believed that the curse of the abyss could not be spread over land. Hugh replied that the chances were very small, because the soldiers of his country were on a mission to prevent its spread. As far as he knew, soldiers inspected the port every day. He asked how could a princess only from the cast ever see this. The princess shrank from her terrible thoughts. She thought about how she could have become infected with a kind of plague in their duchy, who tried to kill her and for what purpose it was done. Dr. Lauren returned after sunset. He came in with a lit candle in his hand and asked how the princess's task was going. The man immediately noticed a broken vase on the floor and two tense children who were calmly talking before his arrival. The doctor noticed fresh bandages on Hugh. Dr. Lauren slyly said that it seemed to him that something unexpected was happening in the hospital while he was away. The man also added that, nevertheless, the princess passed the necessary test. Dr. Lauren delighted the princess that she could now study medicine with him. The girl should just come to the clinic every day for this. Sonia glowed with happiness and agreed. But the man immediately changed the topic of conversation and pointed out to her the broken vase. Dr. Lauren told her to first clean up the fragments, and in the future this will be one of her responsibilities. The princess began to fuss in fear and began to apologize to the doctor for the damage she had caused. Dr. Lauren approached his patient and threw a shirt at him so that he could get dressed. He told the guy that since he allowed the princess to leave so easily, she would now be responsible for changing Hugh's clothes. The boy looked dumbfounded at his doctor. With anger, Hugh called Dr. Lauren an insensitive demon. But Dr. Lauren did not pay the expected attention to his words. The man closely watched the diligent princess who was sweeping the floor. He nicknamed her the Canary. The doctor noticed that the young canary took things too seriously, and this may become more problematic than he expected. The princess, having finished, happily flew up to her new teacher. She chirped that she would like to study medicine as soon as possible. She especially wanted to get acquainted with knowledge about the plague. The man stopped the flow of the girl's words with his hand. He said that if she mentioned acceleration one more time, he would send Sonia back. After all, there is no such thing as a short course in medicine. He asked what she thought life was all about. Sonia assured that this was not what she meant, but the doctor continued and asked if the princess thought that medicine was like singing, as simple as the appearance of sound. He ordered her not to argue with him, but first to learn the basics of science. The wounded boy whispered angrily that Dr. Lauren was a bad person. Hugh said that he couldn't even watch anymore how the doctor had been stuffing himself all this time and not teaching the girl something. Dr. Lauren glared at his patient after his angry remark. Hugh quickly turned away from the evil doctor, but Lauren didn't say anything to him, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Dr. Lauren told the student to go to the Royal Library and begin reading an illustrated guide to healing herbs. Afterwards, he planned to give her a couple of tests, so she should prepare. Sonia obediently agreed. Dr. Lauren told the princess that she could call him Master, and noted that he did not need students wandering around the hospital at night, so the doctor sent her home. The girl happily agreed. Her blue eyes sparkled with thoughts about the library. She briefly thought that she herself could have guessed to go there for the necessary knowledge. The princess left the doctor and his patient, going home. At the exit from the hospital, her faithful maid Rainbow was waiting for her. It was already dark outside, and Rainbow was worried about her mistress. The maid ran up to Sonia in tears and grabbed her hand, exactly where the cut was. The princess groaned in pain. Rainbow persistently asked whether Lauren had caused trouble for the princess. Rainbow realized that the princess groaned for a reason, and pulled back the long sleeves of Sonia's dress. The maid, through her tears, noticed the cut and asked why the princess was wounded. But the little princess happily looked at the cut and replied that this was what she paid for her desired activities. The princess noted that it was a great deal. Rainbow did not understand what Sonia meant, because only she knew the true reason. Rainbow sadly took the princess's palm and said that His Highness and all the girl's brothers would be worried about her, so they should quickly go back and rest. But the princess had other plans for the remaining free time of the evening. She refused to the alarmed Rainbow and said that she was going to the library now. Sonia was going to find information about the missionaries because this was the only clue she had. Two little girls walked quietly along the empty corridors of the palace, moving towards the library. The alarmed Rainbow carried a lit lantern that illuminated their path. Sonia walked happy and filled with optimism. The library door was open. The princess had never been there before, so she gasped in delight. After all, the library was very large, the ceilings were high, and all the walls were filled to the top with a variety of books. Someone suddenly called the princess by name, which surprised the girl, because she did not expect to meet anyone there. This was the second brother Ansel. He said that he saw for the first time that his little sister visited the library. The girl said ashamedly that she went to the library, but she and her brother Ansel came at different times, so he didn't see her. Rainbow giggled softly at the princess's lies. The young man smiled softly and did not pay attention to such a little lie from his sister. Prince Ansel asked what the dear princess was looking for in the library this time. The girl noticed a book in her brother's hands and asked him to tell about his book, and in return she would tell about hers. This request surprised the prince a little. He raised his book and answered the girl that this book was about customs and events in the Western Duchy. Quite interesting in his opinion, the prince asked with interest whether she had ever heard of missionaries. The girl froze as if struck by lightning. She asked her brother in surprise about the missionaries. Rainbow looked over her shoulder and asked with interest what it was, because the girl had never heard of such a thing. Prince Ansel noticed the interest that such a new word aroused among the girls. He invited them to come closer to sit at the table. The prince was going to tell his sister about this in more detail. The prince and princess sat opposite each other at a large table that was located in the middle of the library. The girl tensely waited for her brother's story. She thought about what a coincidence this was. Did Brother Ansel really have something to do with the plague? The girl calmly asked her brother Ansel why he reads ancient legends instead of political theories. The princess wanted to know more about what was on her older brother's mind. Ansel replied without any concern that an envoy from Wace's duchy would be visiting Siland for the goddess ceremony this year. Therefore, his father assigned him to be in charge of this matter, so he did his homework in advance. He turned the page of the book. The princess tensely recalled that 5 years ago, people from the Duchy of Wes were present at the Cod ceremony. She definitely didn't know about this in her past life. There was no reason for her to think about it. The prince said that the book recorded the missionary as an evil god who attacks innocent people and sailors at sea, and thereby spreads a deadly plague. The girl immediately mentally noted that Hugh was telling the truth. Out loud, she asked her older brother what the connection was between this legend and the visit of Wes's envoy. Ansel said that when he went through customs in the Duchy of Wes, he learned that there was a song there created by sailors for a missionary. The sailors firmly believed that they could avoid disaster when they sang it. The man ran his finger over the notes in the book. The young man told the princess that the rhythm of the music that sounded among Wes's sailors was similar to 7 of the 10 hymns that the princess had learned to dedicate to the goddess of Siland. After these words, the man fell silent, and there was silence in the library. It was as if he gave the girl time to think. Sonia asked that if the songs for the evil god and goddess Siland were similar, then could they be somehow connected? The man folded his hands in front of him and leaned his entire body on the table. Ansel recalled that Sonia agreed to sing at the ceremony. He thought she already knew something about this. The girl suddenly reached across the wide table for the book. She wanted to see what was there. Sonia noticed that the rhythm and melody were actually exactly the same, only the ending was different. Sonia read that the missionary, the sea monster of the Duchy of Wes, is described as having several spiral tentacles that are flexible. According to survivors, the missionary twists his own torso to create a terrible whirlwind. Then a storm will come. It was assumed that the Maysian plague was something that was part of the connection to the original form of the monster. The name missionary is associated with the Siland Empire. But the girl noticed with regret that all the important pages were torn off. The princess noticed a list of people on the spread of the book who had read it. Marles Rum, Sudan Korma, Ritli, Ramsay Siland, and Ansel Siland were listed there. The girl froze, as if struck by lightning from the understanding of who had read the information in the book. Prince Ansel noticed that the words had already disappeared when he found this book. That's why the man wanted to ask the princess if she knew anything. The princess, in feigned amusement, answered her brother that she had never heard of the missionary until Ansel told her about it. The girl didn't want her brother to guess anything. Sonia returned the book to her brother and said that she would better go look for some illustrated guide to herbs and a few entry-level medical books. After all, Dr. Lauren said he was going to check on her. Prince Ansel said that the princess could read this boring book about ancient legends. He advised his sister to take a break if reading became too much for her. The princess got up from her chair and with a feigned sigh told her brother that he always says that he loves Sonia most of all. But Ansel, in her opinion, still did not believe that the princess could study medical science. The young man smiled softly. The prince asked the girl how could he not believe in her, because after all, she was Ansel's younger sister. He assured Sonia that of course he believed in her, while adjusting his round glasses on the bridge of his nose. The little girl pointed her finger at her brother and said that the word liar was written in big letters on Ansel's glasses. She assigned her brother in the form of a gray sly fox with glasses. The prince smiled and said that his little sister was definitely getting smarter with time, but he still loved her with all his heart. The last words of her older brother angered the girl. She shouted at him not to laugh at her about loving from the bottom of her heart. From an overabundance of emotions, the girl clenched her fists and her cheeks turned red. The girl turned around offendedly and headed towards the exit from the library. The elder brother showed her books and asked her to wait, because these were guides to herbs and basic medicine that she was looking for. The princess, hearing her brother's words, turned around sharply and went back to take the books from him and thank him for his help. The man gently stroked the girl's hair and said that he never jokes. The princess thought sadly as she walked along the dark corridors to her chambers. The girl only remembered about the goddess ceremony in her past life, that she saw many strangers at the summer solstice festival. The father asked the girl to sing a hymn to the goddess at the festival, and when she sang it, these strangers looked straight at her. But Ansel came and took these people away, and then the girl left the meeting place with Ramsey, Mello, and Nello. The girl stopped in shock because of her frightening thoughts. She began to suspect Brother Ansel that it was he who infected her with the plague in a past life. The girl asked her maid to watch her brother Ansel when the princess was studying at the clinic. Rainbow stared at the princess in confusion. The maid asked the girl if she had heard the request correctly and asked why the princess needed it. Sonia lightly slapped Rainbow on the forehead with a book and ordered her to do as she said. The little princess stood at the open window and looked at the new moon. A warm wind was blowing outside, blowing the girl's long hair. Confused, she began to remember her past life. The girl sadly remembered that in her past life it was Ansel who was the heir to the crown, the brother of whom she was so proud. Ansel has always been impeccable. His mentors praised him in every lesson, be it etiquette, military strategy, mathematics, or history. Sonia remembered that in those days, when she was lying sick in bed, Ansel came to her on the last day of every month. The brother always gently stroked her hair and said that the goddess was blessing the girl. Prince Ansel personified perfection, but now the thought occurred to Sonia that she knew absolutely nothing about her brother and his preferences. The girl remembered her brother's words that he never jokes and ordered herself not to panic. She hoped that there was enough time for fate to change and just wanted to remain calm. Sonia promised herself to find out the whole truth. She decided it was time to rest, so she went to her bed. The girl put her favorite soft bear next to her. She lost herself in sweet dreams, but after a while the nightmares of the past began. Sonia screamed in her sleep that she was in pain. The alarmed Rainbow ran into the princess's chambers in a nightgown and loose, tangled hair. The girl did not understand what happened to her highness. Sonia, tearful, sat wrapped in a large feather blanket on the bed and whispered that she was very scared. The princess did not want to sleep alone. Rainbow, half asleep, did not realize what was happening and did not know how to help her princess. The princess's little body was shaking very much. She asked Rainbow if she was alive. This question surprised the impressionable maid. She began to tensely swarm around Sonia and ask if she had a nightmare again. Rainbow promised that she would protect the princess at the cost of her life and that she would not be afraid of anything. But these words did not calm the frightened princess, since she knew about her possible future. Sonia said that she had a nightmare in which she fell ill again and died in the same bed. She wiped tears from her cheeks. Rainbow hugged the princess and asked if this was the dream she told His Majesty about yesterday. Sonia admitted that every time she closed her eyes, she remembered how she grew up from that age until she was 16 years old, and then died. The surprised maid asked the girl if she was talking about her own memories. The princess answered in the negative. She said that she meant what she experienced in the dream as if it really happened. The maid burst into tears because of the intense sadness of her beloved princess and promised her that she would immediately bring the doctor to the room. The maid quickly ran out the door to fulfill her promise. She asked to wait, because she would return immediately. Sonia was left alone in frightening silence, and in the room in which her death occurred during her first life. The girl asked herself if this meant that she was not used to her second life, or if it meant something deeper. Sonia did not want to be left alone. Late at night, a maid loudly banged on the door of the hospital building. She called loudly for Dr. Lauren. Rainbow had time to throw on only a light cape. She was in such a hurry. Hugh opened the door with a creak, a lit candle in his hand. He told the girl that Dr. Lauren had just fallen asleep and asked what was the reason for such a late visit. In a panic, Rainbow began to explain confusedly that lately, Her Highness had been having nightmares, that she had serious problems with sleep. The girl asked Dr. Lauren to examine the princess. It was enough for the boy to hear Sonia's name to get worried. He pretended to scold Rainbow for screaming loudly in the clinic building. This irritated him, especially considering that it was night. Rainbow flared with indignation, but Hugh did not pay attention to the girl. Without leaving the threshold, he began to shout loudly to Dr. Lauren. He called the man a medical botanist and ordered him to get up. Hugh threatened that if he did not get up, he would throw away his freshly ground salted roots. In response, Hugh immediately heard a reciprocal insult and an order that he should not dare to do this. Lauren asked him if he wanted to die or if he thought the doctor wouldn't kick his patient's ass. The sleepy man came out with glowing, evil eyes. Rainbow immediately began to anxiously tell the doctor that the princess seemed to be haunted by nightmares. After all, she continues to wake up at night for 2 days in a row. The girl asked the doctor to go and examine Sonia. The man pointed his finger at the boy and asked if he heard it. He ordered him to quickly prepare a first aid kit because the princess was waiting. Hugh said he couldn't believe Lauren was bossing a patient around. The boy asked if the doctor had a conscience. The man was not embarrassed. He calmly gathered his long hair into a ponytail. He said that if Hugh condemned him, he would pay for it. The doctor, Rainbow, and Hugh walked along the corridors of the palace towards the princess's chambers. Lauren asked the maid to describe in detail Her Highness's symptoms. The girl said that Sonia wakes up at night in a cold sweat and mutters something under her breath. Rainbow noticed that the princess was not as cheerful as before. Hugh walked a little ahead, so the maid told him the way and showed him which door to enter to get to the princess's chambers. The boy carried Dr. Lauren's first aid kit and was the first to enter the door. The princess thought it was her maid and quickly ran into the boy, hugging him. She whispered that her friend had finally returned. Hugh hugged the girl in shock as she hugged him tightly and cried into her chest. But then Sonia realized the mistake, moved away and looked at the boy in surprise. Lauren closed his eyes in embarrassment at what he saw, and Rainbow froze in shock. The boy embarrassedly moved away from the princess, who was no less embarrassed than he was about the situation. Hugh told Sonia that he is not Rainbow, so she should let him go quickly. The princess was put back into bed. The doctor sat next to her on a chair and examined her. Dr. Lauren noted that the girl is physically fine, but she may have mental problems. Dr. Lauren thoughtfully told Rainbow that it seemed that the princess's body was not in harmony with her soul, as was described in one book, but the recipe for recovery still remained unknown to the doctor. Sonia swallowed tensely, because she listened carefully and said that she did not quite understand what the doctor was talking about. Lauren expressed regret that there is not enough information about mental illness in medical books. The man asked the boy who was standing at the window not to stand idle, but to go to the clinic and bring silly leaves, because they did not bring enough herbs. He also said to tell the guards to report to the king about the princess's condition. The boy agreed without any barbs. Dr. Lauren seriously addressed the princess with the words that knowing whether a patient is lying or not is fundamental in medicine. The man seemed to hint that he understood a little more. Dr. Lauren told the princess that if she was hiding something from him, then she should not expect that the doctor would be able to completely cure her. The doctor's words saddened the girl and made her think. But their conversation was destined to be interrupted. The door hit the wall loudly as the king opened them abruptly. He ran anxiously into his daughter's chambers. Behind him could be seen all of the princess's older brothers. The girl was very surprised when she saw her family. She asked why they came. The king gently stroked his daughter's hair and said that he would take care of everything. The man noticed that his little princess was very pale. The little girl was sincerely glad to see her father and his affection. Nello noticed that Sonia really looked like a cat, especially when her father stroked her head. Mello said that he was very jealous, and his father had never been so gentle with them. The king exhaled heavily at the twins' whispers. He told them to back off. The man noted that not spanking such naughty boys is his greatest love for the two of them. Sonia looked indignantly at the prankster brothers. Mello and Nello immediately pestered Jesse's older brother. They whined to him that their father did not love them, so they could only turn to their older brother for consolation. Jesse ordered them to disappear. Ansel approached the frightened girl. The young man brought with him a stuffed rabbit that the princess had wanted before. He said that Sonia can hug him when she can't sleep for a long time. But the girl did not appreciate her brother's concern. She fearfully thanked him and began to huddle closer to her father. Sonia asked to put the rabbit on the nightstand. The king asked her what happened. The girl buried her face in her father's chest. She was afraid that Ansel really had something to do with her illness. This behavior of his beloved sister greatly upset the prince. He didn't know how to behave and what were the reasons for Sonia's changed attitude. The youngest Prince Ramsay shouted indignantly that if Sonia could not sleep, then they should all keep her company. The boy accused his sister of being very spoiled. The girl began to make excuses in fear. She told her brother that every time she closed her eyes, she would have nightmares. Sonia insisted that she was not doing this on purpose. The little princess clung closer and closer to her father when Ramsay began calling her names. The dissatisfied boy called Sonia a slug who cannot imagine his life without his father. Sonia began to make excuses at first, and then wondered why she still saw herself as a small child in her second life. The king hugged his upset daughter and sternly ordered Ramsay not to go too far. The boy obeyed with displeasure. After this incident, Hugh quietly entered the room and bowed. The boy told Dr. Laurent that he had brought the herbs he asked for. The doctor bowed to the king and reported that the princess's soul and her body were not harmonious. He believed that at the moment she needed rest, so His Majesty and their highnesses could visit Sonia later. And Lauren asked to leave all the worries to him. The king answered the doctor that he was counting on him to take care of the princess. Afterwards, all the men of the royal family left the princess's room. Ramsay passed by Hugh, who stood at the entrance to the princess's chambers. The prince gave the boy a painful push with his shoulder and asked him if he really thought he could escape. Ramsay called Hugh a black-haired mongrel. Dr. Lauren prepared a decoction for the princess, which she could not drink because it was too bitter. Rainbow encouraged the princess to finish it quickly. The princess's teacher, like a true mentor, ordered her to take medicine every evening for a week. He said that gradually the nightmares would disappear. Behind him, Hugh was stirring the new medicine in a bowl with a wooden stick. When the medicine was ready, the boy, embarrassed, handed the container to the equally embarrassed princess. The doctor patted the tired princess's hair and wished her to rest well. As he left, Dr. Lauren waved his hand at Sonia and told her to come back when she was better to continue her training. The princess doomedly pounded her hands on the bed, saying that such a cold doctor could never be caring. The girl didn't know if the medicine had worked or if she had already gotten used to her second life. Be that as it may, the nightmares soon disappeared. But her search for information about whether it was a plague or a missionary came to a dead end. Sonia couldn't find anything, no matter how hard she tried. The princess sadly walked along the corridor of the palace with many books in her hands. She thought that these were the last books about Wes's dukedom. They were her last hope. Behind was a tired Rainbow, who, with the last of her strength, was dragging an even larger stack of books. The girl was intensely interested in whether Sonia would be able to read all these books. Sonia replied that she would look at them when she was free at the clinic. The girl said she thought she could read them all. Dr. Lauren heard her words and asked if she would like to take a break from medicine in his clinic. He hinted that the princess clearly needed a test. The girls, when they heard the doctor's proposals, abruptly threw down their books and clasped hands closely. There was undisguised horror on their faces, and both of them thought that Dr. Lauren was a heartless monster. Dr. Lauren sat at the table and examined the test that the princess performed. He noted that by looking at her test, he really couldn't tell whether she was diligent or not. Hugh, who was standing nearby, quickly looked over the doctor's shoulder and read the girl's answers. He was surprised because she indicated the correct methods of treatment with the wrong names of drugs. The princess, ashamed and embarrassed, answered quietly that the medicinal herbs were so similar that she could not remember what was what. Dr. Lauren sternly told the princess to go and correct the wrong names she had just written by turning these herbs into medicines. The princess embarrassedly poked her index finger against her other index finger. The girl still quietly noted that she could find these herbs, but did not know how to prepare the medicine correctly. Hugh mockingly told Lauren that he thought too highly of the princess's abilities. The guy laughed that who would dare to use the medicine that Sonia would make. But Dr. Lauren broke his amusement and whispered quietly, covering his mouth with his hand, that it was Hugh who would try Sonia's medicine. Hugh jumped away from the doctor in horror and hissed at him to repeat his words. Dr. Lauren slyly replied to the boy that he was in no position to tease his student. He added that it was for him that the girl would make medicine. Sonia looked at her teacher with delight when she heard the words about the student. Hugh hissed angrily that he was still a patient. The boy told Lauren that he was a heartless monster in the skin of a doctor. Lauren calmly replied that only he could lecture his student. The princess laughed loudly and thanked the teacher. She assured Dr. Lauren that she would do everything in her power. Hugh muttered dissatisfiedly that he should not sit idly by. He approached the girl, who was surprised, and asked what he needed. Hugh answered her in a businesslike manner that in order to save his life, he would follow her wherever she went. The princess went to the garden to search for medicinal herbs. It was really difficult for the girl to distinguish them from each other. Even with a manual on herbs, She sat for a long time and looked at some blade of grass. The dissatisfied Hugh was always nearby and looked after the girl. He tried to tell her where which plant was. Hugh was clearly more knowledgeable in matters related to herbs. The girl puffed out her plump cheeks displeasedly at the boy's remarks. She wanted to figure things out on her own, and not accept handouts from Hugh. But Hugh calmly shrugged his shoulders. The guy told her that his life depended on Sonia's choice, so she could not be independent. Hugh answered in the affirmative to the question about her being so unreliable. So the girl began to sulk at him. The boy was being childish and stuck his tongue out at his friend. In response, the girl began to run after him and shout for him to stop. She threatened him with a heavy herbal manual, with which she wanted to hit the laughing boy. Hugh ran and laughed with the slower girl. He shouted back to her that he was not so stupid as to stop. As the boy ran past a large opening in the wall, he noticed Ramsay, so he stopped. Hugh doubtfully looked at what the younger prince was doing. The girl caught up with her friend, who had stopped and lightly touched his shoulder with a book. Sonia called out to the boy who had been staring at it. The boy quickly turned around and gave her a finger sign for the girl to be quiet. Sonia looked out from behind the bushes in confusion and saw her brother Ramsay. She quietly whispered to Hugh the question of what Ramsay was doing there. Ramsay struck the back of an adult man who was kneeling in front of him with a long riding crop. The man's hands were tied with ropes. The girl turned to her friend in fear and quietly whispered that it was cruel. Hugh touched his chest with an exhalation and whispered to the princess that Ramsay was his too. The girl, with tears in her eyes, whispered words of apology to Hugh. Sonia asked for forgiveness for the behavior of her brother Ramsay. Hugh smiled warmly at the touched girl and stroked her hair. The boy said that Ramsay is Ramsay, and Sonia is Sonia, so he does not blame the princess for what her cruel brother did. The man who was whipped by Ramsay, meanwhile, could no longer endure the pain from the many cuts on his back. Ramsay raised his whip hand to strike again and again. The man asked the prince to spare him, admitting his mistake. But the prince, in anger, did not want to listen to the pleas of his victim. Ramsay shouted that he belonged to blue royal blood, so the man did not dare to slander his mother, the king's wife. The princess looked at her brother's cruelty with pain in her eyes. Ramsay heard the quiet sound that Sonia made when she accidentally broke a twig. The prince began to shout and ask what uncivilized creature was sneaking around there. Hugh exchanged tense glances with the frightened princess. The girl was trembling all over with fear. Hugh again gently touched the girl's hair with his hand and asked her not to come out of hiding. The princess's eyes grew to an unprecedented size because of what she saw. Hugh confidently emerged from his hiding place with the princess and calmly informed Ramsay that he was just passing by. But Ramsay smiled bloodthirstily and called him an abandoned dog. The prince laughed that the boy was eavesdropping to tell his people, in the hope that he would be taken home. Hugh exhaled, calming down, and repeated that he was just passing by and was not interested in the prince's antics. It was noticeable that there was a long-standing enmity between the boys. Ramsay pointed out Hugh to the man he had beaten earlier and said he would give him a chance. The man should have beaten Hugh, thereby making the prince happy, so that Ramsay would acquit him. The bloodied man was freed from the ropes and immediately attacked Hugh. He shouted that the boy was a brat and that he should blame not the man, but his origins. But then the princess ran out and screamed heart-rendingly for everyone to stop. Hugh easily dodged the attack, and the man fell with a whistle at the princess's feet. He hit himself hard, so he screamed loudly. The princess was frightened when she saw his bloody back so close. Drops of blood sprayed from the deep wounds of the injured man and stained the girl's dress. The princess stared in shock and fear at the blood on the hem of her dress. Ramsay noticed blood on his sister and began to scream heart-rendingly at the man. The prince called him useless trash and said that he wanted to beat Hugh with his hands and not touch Princess Sonia. The man fearfully bowed before the frightened princess. He prayed for the girl to save him because a man needs to protect his family. The princess began to hide behind Hugh in fear, because she was powerless in this situation. The man was not one of the princess's people, so she had no right to free him. Ramsay, after hearing the man's request, began to shout in anger that he was begging for forgiveness from another gentleman at a time when his own was nearby. The boy concluded that it was necessary to spank him more. The prince ordered his other employees to bring back the man, whom he called a traitor. The wounded man understood that his condition was deplorable, so he crawled closer to the girl and began to beg her. He didn't want to die. The words "I don't want to die" reminded the princess of her first life and death from illness. This memory pierced me from the inside and reminded me of those feelings of not wanting to die. The girl, touched, came out from behind her protector and sadly approached the pleading man. She took the hand of an adult man with her small hands and looked into his lost eyes. An elderly man from the prince's guard told the princess that they were only following orders. He asked Hugh and the princess not to disturb them, but Hugh blocked the man's path and replied that they could not take anyone without the princess's permission. Determination changed the princess's childish face. She firmly told the crying man that she would not let him die. The man from the guard tensely asked Her Grace not to make their job difficult. But the princess did not even turn to him and did not listen at all. She put her hand on the bowed man's head and said that she, Sonia van Norton Seiland, in the name of the first daughter of Emperor Seiland and the child of the goddess, gives blessing and protection to this man. An irritated Prince Ramsay hissed that Sonia seemed to be going against her brother, but that didn't stop the princess. The girl continued her words of blessing. The princess bit her finger, from which blood spurted out, with which she wrote a sign on the forehead of the wounded man. The girl whispered that from this day on, the man and his soul belonged to the goddess Seiland. Magic sparkled around the princess and the man. The girl said that the goddess blesses a man with health and happiness. Peace and happiness reigned on the girl's face. Everyone stared in shock at what was happening. They shouted that the goddess herself was appearing. All of Prince Ramsay's servants bowed before the little girl and asked her to bless and forgive them. Ramsay really didn't like what was happening. He was jealous of the attention his people gave his little sister. The prince began to call them all clots of garbage and that they could not even punish the wounded. The prince angrily snatched his whip from the maid. He angrily asked if he should do it himself. The boy began to swing the long whip in all directions. People who did not expect this began to run away in panic from the prince's long whip in order to hide. One of Ramsay's employees, while running away, carelessly pushed his elbow painfully into the little princess's face. The girl did not expect this, retreated, and catching the edge of the pool, fell into the water screaming. Hugh stood far away and did not have time to hold Sonia. The maid noticed that the princess had fallen into the water. She started screaming in hysterics that Her Majesty was in the water and asked someone to help the little girl. Sonia slowly went under the water because she couldn't swim at all. Hugh fearfully began to push aside people who were running in panic from Ramsay's whip and getting in his way. As he ran, he pulled off the disturbing doublet and jumped into the water after the princess. The prince, frightened that the princess was drowning, fell to the floor. Ramsay started screaming hysterically that he had done nothing, so it wasn't his fault. The boy realized what problems would arise because of his whim, because the king loved his daughter most of all. The princess was drowning and in a panic called Hugh to save her. Thus the girl, opening her mouth, lost precious air and choked on water. The darkness of the waters engulfed her consciousness. The princess only felt how cold she was. Death seemed to be pulling me into its arms again, but Hugh arrived in time to save the princess. While unconscious, the girl saw a beautiful goddess who told the princess that her destined hour had not yet come. The goddess said that Sonia should return to life because the blood of the goddess flows in her veins. Sonia lay on the hospital bed and slowly opened her eyes. She immediately heard the whispers of the people there that Her Highness had finally woken up. The girl sat up on the bed in surprise and asked why she was in the hospital. Rainbow, with tears in her eyes, confusedly answered the princess that the day had passed, and if Sonia had not woken up, the maid would have cried her eyes out. Dr. Lawrence sternly told the princess to lie down because she had a cold. The man said that Sonia needs to rest a lot and improve her health. Hugh stood behind him and held a bowl of medicine for Sonia. Hugh approached the princess's bed and handed her the medicine. The boy embarrassedly asked the girl to take medicine that would speed up her recovery. Sonia gratefully accepted the bowl and joyfully asked Hugh if he had pulled it out of the water. The boy became even more embarrassed. His cheeks turned red. He answered the question in the affirmative and said how good it was that Sonia woke up. Afterwards, the boy sneezed very loudly, which greatly frightened the princess, who almost spilled all the medicine on the bed. Dr. Lauren approached the boy and displeasedly told him that he himself was still sick, so he ordered the boy not to be so self-confident and to go back to bed. After all, if Hugh ignores his order and hangs around, Then Lauren will ask His Majesty to change his status from Sir Whitehawk to Sir Sick Chicken. Hugh replied that he would lie there until he took the pills. The princess asked in surprise what Dr. Lauren meant by Sir Whitehawk. Rainbow answered instead of the doctor. The maid angrily said that the princess did not know because she was sleeping. A lot happened during her one-day coma. The girl was burning with anger and clenched her fists as she spoke. Rainbow said that Hugh was the first to jump after the princess after she fell, and the boy was the one who saved Sonia. The maid called Ramsay a weakling as he fell on the grass in shock. Prince Ramsay took his men and fled as soon as he saw that the princess was unconscious. The remaining guards carried the princess and Hugh to the hospital. His Majesty was furious as soon as he learned about everything that had happened. He loudly hit the table and shouted for everyone to remember his word, because from now until tomorrow's ceremony of the goddess's last day, Ramsay will be imprisoned in the Temple of Seyland without permission to leave. The king immediately dropped all his business and rushed to the hospital to see the princess, who was lying unconscious. He stroked his girl and quietly whispered tender words. Prince Ansel and Jessie also came to see their younger sister, but they saw that the princess was unconscious and sent the certificate and sword of knighthood to His Majesty with a grand for Hugh. Then the men left in a hurry. Rainbow also enthusiastically told that Mello and Nello secretly sneaked into the hospital. The twins left the new books they bought at the castle as compensation to the princess and also quickly disappeared. The princess laughed joyfully and said that the hospital had almost turned into a large hall because of so many visitors.